Right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today we're going on a pretty wild journey, starting from the front pages of the news and going all the way down into the digital shadows. We're going to unpack the most pressing, highly visible crises happening across the African continent right now, and then we're going to completely pivot. We're going to uncover a massive, hidden digital influence operation that is quietly trying to shape global diplomacy. It is a really brilliant look at how modern power is actually wielded today.
So here's our roadmap for today. 1. Crises across the continent. 2. Chad exits the ICC. 3. Rwanda's open secret. 4. The digital influence playbook. 5. Targeting global diplomats. And finally, 6. Silencing the domestic press.
Section 1. Crisis across the continent. Let's start by looking at the actual physical friction points happening right now on the streets. The crises you can literally see and smell.
We're starting off in Uganda. So the government there decided to borrow a policy from neighboring Rwanda, a mandatory national cleanup day on the last Saturday of the month. But man, did it severely backfire. The state enforced this cleanup with police roadblocks, basically grounding all commuters. Citizens were compelled to gather up trash, but there was one huge problem. The government had absolutely no plan for disposal. The result? The capital, Kampala, was left with mountains of rotting, uncollected waste, some of it even containing animal and human remains. So a mandatory health initiative ironically triggered a massive toxic disaster.
Meanwhile, if we head further south to South Africa, the crisis looks a lot more like brutal physical violence. Take a look at this guy, Gerson Pungweni. He's a Mozambican migrant living in the Dukathale informal settlement, just east of Johannesburg. He is recovering in his home right now after being stabbed 5 times in the back. And why? Simply because he's a migrant. Vigilante groups have been launching these terrifying door-to-door dawn raids in these settlements, kicking down doors, stealing money, and brutally attacking people in a massive wave of xenophobic violence.
These stories really hit home the immediate human toll of these highly visible crises, right? I mean, we've got infrastructural collapse in Uganda and severe social breakdown in South Africa. But add to that Tunisia, where a deadly 50 degrees Celsius heat wave, combined with crippling power and water outages, has led to an estimated 150 to 200 deaths. This environmental disaster has actually fueled massive street protests against the authoritarian rule of President Kais Saied, with young citizens marching to spend intense political crackdowns. These are all incredibly public, physical friction points.
Moving on to Section 2. Chad exits the ICC. Geopolitically speaking, we're seeing a massive, highly public shift happening as we speak.
Chad has just announced it's officially pulling out of the International Criminal Court in The Hague. They're actually the 5th country to do this, following Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Venezuela. Chad's government is accusing the court of focusing disproportionately on Africa, pointing out that a whopping 9 out of the ICC's 13 investigations have taken place on the continent. Now, they are officially denying that they acted on U.S. instructions, even though the U.S. has been heavily logging against the ICC recently. Regardless, this marks a highly visible global recession from the rule of law.
So, those are the big, bold headlines you can easily see. But here's what I want to ask you. What happens when a state's most aggressive moves are deliberately hidden from public view? How on earth do you control the narrative when the battleground isn't the physical streets, but the algorithm?
Which brings us to Section 3, Rwanda's open secret. We are pulling back the curtain on a massive digital operation that we were literally never supposed to see.
There is this staggering duality going on here. On the one hand, globally, Rwanda is celebrated as this ultimate poster child for development. It's a stunning tourism destination, they host massive global sports franchises, and they're even bidding for Formula One. But the hidden reality? They are internationally sanctioned and accused of backing the M23 rebels in the neighboring Democratic Republic of the Congo and laundering conflict minerals, like gold and coltan, to finance that war. Rwanda officially denies this, claiming they're just protecting Tutsi communities. But it begs the question, how does a state maintain such a pristine public reputation amidst such heavy international accusations?
Section 4. The Digital Influence Playbook. Let's look at the leaked playbook of a state-funded influence operation. And the crazy part? We only know about it because of a massive administrative error.
Okay, the absolutely crucial point here is this actual leaked Google spreadsheet. Literally, someone in the Rwandan government set the wrong sharing permissions and left it publicly accessible on the internet. It inadvertently exposed an $85,000 budget run right out of the office of the government spokesperson. It lists 9 specific digital operatives by name, their Twitter handles, and their exact budgets. We're talking details on payments for phones, computers, airtime, and monthly salaries. These individuals present themselves online as just ordinary patriotic citizens, but they're actually state-funded operatives coordinating a massive digital army.
In this network, they don't just tweet randomly, They execute this incredibly sophisticated 4-step playbook. Whenever human rights groups or journalists publish allegations about Rwanda's role in the Congo, this network immediately kicks into gear. First off, they challenge the evidence directly. Second, they aggressively question the author's credibility. Third, they introduce official counter-narratives. And finally, they just flood the reply threads with competing claims. The goal isn't even necessarily to prove they're right, it's just to make any criticism look highly contested and completely isolated.
To see how this actually works in practice, just look at the stark visual contrast between 2 of the operatives on that leaked spreadsheet. On the right, you've got the aggressive layer. These are accounts sharing provocative political cartoons, framing the Congolese army as villains to justify Rwanda's security posture. But on the left, you have Lilian Umuhoza. She rarely even mentions the conflict. Instead, whenever the Congo dominates the news, she floods timelines with these idyllic, beautiful tourism photos of Rwanda's green landscapes. She effectively hijacks the search algorithms. So if you search for Rwanda, you get tranquil prosperity instead of war crimes. It is a brilliant 2-pronged approach.
Section 5. Targeting global diplomats. Who exactly are these precision-guided posts actually meant to influence?
You might assume it's everyday citizens in the region, right? Well, actually, scratch that. You'd be wrong. Civic tech researchers at Threats dug into over 2,000 posts and found something fascinating. These operations were mostly in English, not French or Kiswahili, the local languages, and the accounts were consistently tagging massive institutions like the United Nations and the Council of the European Union. In fact, their activity surged into these synchronized waves exactly 48 hours before the EU Foreign Affairs Council met to discuss possible sanctions against Rwanda.
According to the researchers, the overarching goal here is incredibly specific. These operations don't need to win over mass public opinion. They are precision-guided at policymakers in Brussels and New York. By stripping realities of their context and just flooding the diplomatic digital space with noise, they aim to create just enough doubt and confusion to paralyze international diplomats, and ultimately, that prevents real economic sanctions or political consequences.
Section 6. Silencing the domestic press. Because for a digital influence operation to thrive globally like this, it first requires an absolute vacuum of truth at home. This brings us to exiled journalist Samuel Baker Bayansi. He lays out exactly how the state creates this vacuum. It's basically a classic carrot-and-stick situation. The government offers high-end dinners, free fuel, and tax exemptions to journalists if they abandon unfavorable stories. As Bayansi points out right here, they buy your silence, compromising your ethics while pretending you still have your credibility. And if the bribes don't work, well, the stick is brutal. Bayansi himself was arrested multiple times and received serious threats against his wife and daughter before he finally had to flee to Europe.
The dark reality of Rwanda's media landscape is what makes all this possible. I mean, Rwanda is ranked a dismal 149 out of 180 for press freedom. A strict 2008 media law made it incredibly easy to jail dissidents. Think about this. Since 1996, 8 journalists have been killed or gone missing, and 35 have been forced into exile. Even modern platforms aren't safe anymore. Critical YouTubers face immediate arrest for spreading false information, and in some really tragic recent cases, have actually died in police custody. This is exactly why the state-funded digital influence operatives face zero domestic pushback. The independent voices have simply been erased.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We've seen today how easy it is to focus on the visible crises, the trash in the streets, the physical protests, but when an $85,000 hidden digital spreadsheet can paralyze global diplomacy, and a state can successfully launder its international image while completely erasing its own domestic press, well, when the real battleground shifts from the streets to the algorithm, how can we ever really trust what we see? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and I really hope this leaves you questioning the narratives you encounter on your own feeds.